My name is Latchezar Boyadjiev, and I'm a glass sculptor. I was born in communist Bulgaria. In 1986, I defected to the United States of America in search of liberty and freedom. Philadelphia, home of the Liberty Bell and the National Liberty Museum. Oh, this is exciting. I'm gonna ring the Liberty Bell. We're at the National Liberty Museum in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, and there's an exhibition right now going named Seeking Freedom. I'm part of that show, and I'm really excited and happy to be here. It's 6 artists that came from oppressive governments, oppressive countries, to freedom, to here, to America, to be able to do what they want to do, to be able to be free, which is the most important thing, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to do what I do right now if I'm not free. On the left side there is a piece named Independence, and on the right side there is a piece called Flight. And both of these pieces actually symbolize my search for freedom. They're both uplifting and searching for beauty, for clarity. And I'm really happy to be here, part of that exhibit. Every year the National Liberty Museum holds a glass auction in Philadelphia. Tonight Convergence is being auctioned. It is a beautiful ruby red color with soft lines and has a beautiful uplifting feel to it. I hope it does well. Through my glass sculptures, I capture the beauty of light and its movement with uplifting and thought-provoking contemporary designs. When I was born in 1959, during the really harsh times of the communist Bulgaria, the communist regime, it was the time when Nikita Khrushchev was in power in Russia, and it was very strict and very rigid. It was not easy to be a child there at that time because you were brainwashed since you were pretty much born. Surrounded by propaganda, and it was all about the Communist Party and nothing else. There was no freedom at all. We were very limited in what we could do. We did not have any information from abroad, pretty much. We were very restricted in so many ways. It was not easy to be a free-spirited person and to live in that country, to grow up there.
Did you have any creative interests as a child?
Yes, because my father was surrounded by a lot of creative people. I was exposed to a lot of art and a lot of music since I was little. And I love to draw. I love to draw since I was very little. I still have some drawings from that time when I was probably 3 years or 4 years old. And Also, when I was a little older, 7 years, I started playing the piano and was going to concerts and wanted to become a musician, a classical musician. And later on I picked up also the oboe because I liked the instrument and I wanted to really learn how to play it. So I played the piano from 7 until I was 15 years old.
After learning piano and oboe for 9 years, why did you stop?
Well, I had to. I was faced for the first time in my life with the reality actually in Bulgaria. During that time with the communist reality, I was preparing for auditions in the musical high school in Sofia, Bulgaria, and I wanted to be, that was my dream, to be a musician, and I was not able to get in there because of the fact that none of my family was a member of the Communist Party. And also because I did not have any connections, though, even though I was probably the best top of the school there, and I did not get in there because of that. But then later on, I started, after that I started drawing. I started following actually my other passion was drawing and sculpting with clay. So for the 3 years when I was in high school, I really drew a lot and started to prepare for the exams in the Academy of Art in Sofia, Bulgaria.
So sometimes you literally do have to just start again.
Yeah, sometimes spending an hour or so on a drawing, then I just have to get the rag and erase everything and just start all over and change completely. But it doesn't happen very often. Usually when I start on a piece and it just evolves and takes a few minutes, few hours sometimes to really get the piece right. And if I don't, I just start all again. And that's the creative process. It takes some time. It's not an overnight thing. You gotta think of it and reflect on it, and just take a little break, go out, do something else, and then do that again until I say that's it. And it could happen soon, I hope. Yeah. Okay, I think that should be it. This is the most important step, bringing the two-dimensional drawing to three-dimensional piece. I'm gonna sculpt with clay, water-based clay, and using tools such as spatulas and knives, and I will have to keep the clay always wet so it doesn't dry, and I will be taking a mold from the wet clay, plaster mold. That will be the next step, but this is the most important step, bringing the piece to life. There we go. Maybe I have to prepare that. So we're done with the clay model. It looks pretty good. I'm happy with the result, and now I just have to keep it wet until I make the mold from plaster.
At 18, you had to do national service in the Bulgarian army. Tell me about that.
Yes, it was obligatory. We all had to go for 2 years to serve in the army. And I went to southern part of Bulgaria in the unit, Marines unit, where I was there for about 6 months.
Did you display your creativity during that time?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I did. For the first 6 months, I was painting, drawing. I became the artist of the unit, as well as the postman, and also a radio, the music in the unit. And after half a year working there and doing a lot of work, I went to another unit that I was transferred to in Sofia, in my own town, and we did big sculptures, monuments that were cast in bronze, really up to 21 feet high pieces, cast in sections. So I was working as a sculptor there for a year and a half. So that was my military service.
You were 20 when you left the army. What did you do then?
Well, immediately after I finished the army, I went immediately to the school of in Sofia, the Academy of Art, and started studying for 1 year. I was in Sofia.
Why did you choose ceramics?
Well, I chose ceramics because I really loved to work with clay. I love to sculpt. And also ceramic has a big tradition in Bulgaria.
At what point in your life did you discover glass, or did glass discover you?
Well, I was at the first semester in Bulgaria in the Academy of Art when there were a lot of places advertised, posted as exchange student programs during the communist time, in, of course, with the communist countries. And one of the places that caught my eye was in Prague, in Czechoslovakia. Was misspelled, actually mislabeled as a packaging glass, and everybody was thinking that this is just you're gonna be a designer of packaging, some glasses or whatever, and it was not that though. Even though I chose it and I went to study in Prague, I ended up in the best studio for glass in the world at that time, the studio of Professor Libensky, Stanislav Libensky, a world-renowned figure and one of the fathers in glass art, one of the founders of using actually the glass for the first time as a material for monumental sculpture. And finally we have the mold ready for the cast, of the first cast actually, which will be a plaster, positive plaster of the sculpture, how it's going to look like. But we can imagine already in the mold how the piece is going to look like, looking from the flat side, which will be high polished, looking through it and seeing the piece itself, seeing all the graphics, the lines. Also you could imagine the color will be very deep, and whatever the piece is on the bottom of the piece, it's very thick, the glass, and it's going to be very dark. And as we go up with the lines and up the plane, it's going to get closer and thinner, and the color is going to fade almost to clear up on the top, and the same will be for the sides. So I could pretty much see what's gonna happen already, and I'm excited. The piece is gonna look great. I'm pretty sure about that. I'm very excited. So I got the wax. Now we're gonna use the wax as a special wax that it's to separate when I do the casting in plaster, because it's plaster to plaster, and if I don't put this wax as a release, it will stick.
What happened when you left the Academy of Art? What was the next step?
Well, after graduating in '85, I was there for about 5 years in the Academy of Art. What happened, I had to go back to Bulgaria and as soon as I went back, they took my passport and the police, and they told me that I had to go to work for 3 years in a factory far away from my town. And after a long negotiations, I was able to negotiate that I will work for 5 years after that if they give me a year extension of the passport. So it happened, and they gave me that year extension, and that's where it all hit me, and I knew that was the year that I had to defect. Alright, finally the original is cast into the plaster mold, and it will take probably about 24 hours until it's strong enough to be taken out of the mold. So that will be the next step. We'll see how it's going to turn out. It's already warming up and it's ready. Alright, let's lift it up. Good. Let's slide it back. Okay. Yeah, that'll be fine. So now let's lift the mold. Just let it go. Good.
In 1986, you defected to the USA via Italy, a turning point in your life. How did it all come about?
Well, that was the year that I had to pretty much defect, and it wasn't easy transition and decision that we had to do a lot of things that were not right. We had to sell all of our possessions pretty much to be able to buy our trip to the seaside of former Yugoslavia for 2 weeks, and we had to pay a lot of money, probably about a year's salary, to be able to get in there. And then getting a permission was very difficult from both sides, from my side and from my wife's side as well. But fortunately we were able to get all the documents and the visas right on time. Actually the day before we left was the last visa that we acquired, and left for good.
What was it like to defect?
It was a little scary, it was exciting, and it was a new life that we actually created. Defecting is a very, very difficult task. You leave your whole former life, your family behind, and you start a new life, new adventure, and I knew that is the right decision for me.
How was life in the refugee camp, and how long were you there?
Well, in the refugee camp, we were for probably 3 months actually, and it was not easy. It was old army barracks in Latina, a town 60 kilometers south of Rome. It was overcrowded. The capacity was 1,500, and there were 3,000 people living in there. We just had our basic needs met. We just had food and place where to sleep, and I worked on the side to make some extra money, but it was not easy, no fun.
Why did you choose to come to the United States?
Well, that was always in my dreams since little, and then also I had a cousin who immigrated probably 10 years before me, as well as the influence from my professor Libensky, who was visiting United States very often and always was speaking highly of the life and the possibilities that here or the artists have, especially glass. Well, this is the last step for the positive in plaster. We have to grind it perfectly for all the lines to be perfectly ground, and the shapes have to follow the line. and it all has to be perfect before we make the last mold for the cast in glass.
Could you speak English when you came in 1986?
Yeah, my English was very basic. When we came, I couldn't understand what people were saying, and I couldn't hold a big conversation at all. Could order a drink, let's say, on a bar, but with a lot of mistakes. They will understand me, give me the drink, but that was about it.
How did you manage to support yourselves financially?
Well, it was a decision that we made with my wife then to not to ask the American government for any support. So we really tried very hard to find a job, and we didn't have a car, we didn't have any money. We had $65 in a pocket, and we were living with the friends in the Bay Area of San Francisco. And we found a job. She found a job 1 week after we came as a hamburger stand, and then later on as a cashier in a supermarket. And I found a job 3 weeks after we came with Maslak Art Glasses, a glass studio in Marin County. And I was very happy to work in my field.
When did you open your first glass studio?
Well, after working for two and a half years, I started my studio. I opened my little studio in Oakland, California. That was 3 years after I actually started working for Maslak in 1989.
How did you sell your first sculpture?
At that time, my studio was very small, and I was able only to do few sculptures, optical sculptures, and they were all done by grinding, polishing, and laminating together. And they were very small objects, whatever glass I could find. And the first time I went to a Glass Art Society conference in 1988 in Kent, Ohio, and I took two pieces with me, along with a lot of photographs that I was giving away. And one day a lady came to me and said, "Do you by any chance have that piece with you?" She was holding a photograph of my work, and I says, "Yes, I do. Actually, as a matter of fact, it's in the trunk of my car." So we went to the parking lot, and she and her husband came by. They were collectors, and they liked the piece, and they say, "How much do you want for it?" And that's the first time anybody asked me, "How much do I want for it?" Because I never sold a piece before. So it was a hard decision. I said, $950. And they said, "Okay, good." They wrote a check, gave me the check. I gave them the sculpture, and everybody was happy. We just finished fine grinding the piece, the original, the plaster original, and preparing for the next step, making the molding glass. Before we're doing that, we just applied some shellac with a brush all over the piece, which will help separate the piece from the mold later on. And that will be the last step, so we'll be ready to cast it in glass. The form is finally complete and it's ready. We bang it because to release the bubbles. If they are trapped on the surface, they go up. I don't need a hammer, I need a drill. I think I fried the machine.
How much does that cost per box?
That one, actually, I get a good deal, but normally it costs about $80 a box.
And how many boxes did you just use?
About 10. Okay. Okay, I'll lift it up. Good. All right. Hold the mold. You can take the pieces out. Alright. Good. Push it back a little bit. The whole thing? Yeah, good. It's good. Right. Alright, it's coming out. Alright. And we have a mold. It's finally done. I'm so happy. The mold is ready. And that's the final. Before the glass comes out of the kiln, it's the mold for the glass. And there are some little things that I have to be working on, but it looks pretty good and I'm happy. It's a great mold. All right.
Has there been a kind of evolution to your work over the years?
Yes, looking back, actually, I think I have changed my work a few times. The first stage, I would say, was the optical sculptures that I've been doing from 1988 until 1998. And then I started working with cast glass, started traveling back to Czech Republic and working with colleagues back in the Czech Republic and working and casting there and finishing the work there. There was a lot of traveling back and forth, and that has been going for about 10 years until 2008, 2009. And now I'm in a different stage right now, doing all my work in my studio and changing it as well in a different direction.
Do you sign your work?
Yes, I do sign my work. Actually, the funny thing is that I use the same pen. Since I started from 1987 was the first sculpture I did, until now I use the same pen, and I'm always signing my name, dating the piece and numbering it as well.
Is all glass the same, or do you seek out a special type to use?
Well, there's a lot of different glasses on the market. Not that many particularly for casting in the kiln casting. I do use mostly Czech glass that I import from the Czech Republic. It is non-leaded, and occasionally I use gaffer glass from New Zealand. It has a lead content. It's a lot heavier, so it's good for smaller pieces, but when the pieces are really big, they become extremely heavy. Here we are at the storage area where I store all my glass billets, and I do have about 50 different colors to choose from and to work with, but I do like to work with yellow, with orange, with amber colors and blues as well. And for this piece particularly, I chose the blue color, and all those pieces right next to me, those two piles of glass, will go melted into the mold and become one beautiful sculpture. And each piece weighs about 5.5 pounds. So for this particular piece, we need 110 pounds of glass. And both piles will be melted into become one beautiful piece. So that will be the next step, actually cleaning them up and stacking them into the mold and firing up the kiln. Okay, finally we can start loading the mold with all the glass that needs to be here before firing it up. And we have to be really careful not to touch too much because it's very, at this point it's very brittle, the mold, because it's kind of fragile. Have to be very careful putting all the pieces down so we don't damage the mold.
How many castings do you make of each design?
I do make up to 6 castings of each design, but they're all in a different color, so there is never the same cast. And actually it's very few pieces that I've done so far that are up to 6. Usually I do 1 or 2 or 3 at the most of each design in different color.
How do you describe the style of your sculptures?
I would describe my style as contemporary, abstract sculptures, and also not always abstract. Some are more figurative as well. I do some torsos.
Female figures appear in a lot of your sculptures. Why is that?
Well, for me, the female figure is one of the most beautiful forms in the world, and has been inspiration since the first artwork was discovered until now, and continues. And it is something that we are all related to. We all come from there, and I think it's very inspiring.
How much do your sculptures weigh?
Well, I would say normally the bigger pieces are around 100 pounds, 120 pounds, but they do, for the smaller pieces, as between 20 and 40 pounds. Lift up, straight up. Okay, lift it up, move it out. Looking good. Next step will be starting to grind it. A lot of grinding and polishing. This surface will be ground and polished, all this here. So is that surface is also going to be ground and polished. The rest will stay matte. This part and that and this part. And of course the whole flat side on the back will be as well ground and polished. Good. I'm gonna cut out the overflow here, and there's a little overflow. I have to cut it out in order to remove it. Ouchie.
Your sculptures really come to life when they are illuminated. Depth must be a key design point.
Yes, light is the most important part of the work, especially with glass, because if you turn the lights off, you don't see anything. That's pretty much for any artwork, but especially for the glass. The light brings the material to life. It transmits the light, it changes it, it refracts it, it's also reflecting it, and it is very important part of the experience when you look at the sculpture.
Do you try and make each series different, or do you just go with the flow?
I don't try to make any, but occasionally I change. Let's say I work on, sometimes I get inspired and I work on a series of torsos, let's say 3 or 4 pieces or 5 pieces, and then some time passes and I work on more geometric forms, and it just comes natural to me without making any decision. Now I should be working on that kind of work or another.
What do you think about when you are drawing or sculpting?
What I'm thinking, it's quite a few things. First, I'm thinking that I really want to make a great piece. And I'm always listening to music when I draw, and I'm getting inspired by music as well. It's a big part of my work, actually. It's music, the motion.
How do you describe your sculptures to someone who hasn't seen them?
I've tried a few times. It's not very easy. What I would say, if you haven't seen them, imagine a sculpture that is very dynamic, beautiful, clean lines, very emotional, energetic, fluid, with the variations of colors. With satin parts and some polished as well. That's how I would describe it.
Is all your work for sale, or have you ever thought, I have to keep that one?
Well, there are some pieces that I want to keep, and very few that I do, actually. There is one torso that I really like, one of my best pieces that I want to keep.
How did the recession affect you?
That was not an easy going through that. 2009, pretty much almost all the sales stopped at 2009, and it was very hard to keep the studio going and everything else around me. And it's still not great, it's a lot better, but things are okay. Cannot complain.
What are you working on right now?
Right now I just finished, last week, finished the last big piece that I've done. I still haven't named it yet. It's a beautiful sculpture in blue color that is... I'm looking forward to show it for the first time. And also working on a few other projects. My new ideas that I have are large glass panels that I want to do more monumental work for architecture, for interiors in different places. Yeah, I would just finish grinding it with a lot of different grids that we use the diamond pads to polish, to grind the piece, and using a lot of water. The next step will be actually my better half will be coming in and helping me with grinding the fine lines by hand, the fine details in the sculpture. And also what you can see here, it's a little reflection of a barbed wire, which is kind of symbolic of what's all about. Escaping from Bulgaria, communist Bulgaria, and it's back in my work somehow. It just, the sun made it more visible.
You have your sculptures on display in many galleries around the world. How many pieces do you have on display at any one time?
Yes, I do have quite a few galleries, maybe around 10 galleries that I work with, mostly in the United States, in Canada and Europe. Just started working with a gallery in London right now. And I do have probably three, at least three, maybe 4 or 5 in each gallery at any time, pretty much.
Did you ever exhibit in your native country of Bulgaria?
Yes, for the first time I decided 2008 to make an exhibition, and I went back there to my country, and actually I really loved the Academy of Art. They have a beautiful gallery, so that's where I had my exhibition. It was one of the biggest exhibitions that I've done so far, about 20 pieces, and it was a great success. It was covered through all the media, in the newspapers, TVs, and everywhere. It was very popular, and I was really pleased and happy to show it there.
Have you ever had your work commissioned by an individual or business?
Yes, I've had quite a few commissions working with different corporations as well, designing some work for them, some larger pieces and some smaller as well for awards. I have done quite a few commission pieces, yes.
How do you handle all the aspects of creating the artwork, sculpting, casting, finishing, photography, marketing, and packing your work?
Yeah, it's quite a few tasks, and it's not easy. You have to do it. I have to do it all pretty much by myself, with a little help occasionally. My wife helps me a lot in a few areas, and it's not easy, but I'm happy to do it, and I love doing it.
Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Well, it's hard to predict the future. I would like to see myself, let's say, spending half a year here in California and half a year in Europe as well.
Do you have any desire to return to your roots?
I do want to spend more time there. I probably will not return for good because my life is here and my children are here, but I love to go back to Bulgaria because now it's a democracy, there's no more communists, so it's a great place and I have a lot of friends and it's a beautiful country. So I'd love to spend more time there, yes.
What do you want to be remembered for?
Well, I want to be remembered for my artwork, as artwork that inspires, that brings beauty, that enriches lives, bring positive feelings. My art, I think, is not pretentious. I would say it's timeless. I do believe that in 100 years from now, looking at my artwork, I think people will really enjoy it still.